Coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, just days after a Prime Minister spoke on the issue, President Park Geun-hye vows to get to the bottom of alleged political interference in last year's presidential election. She urges lawmakers to leave the case to the judicial branch. As China's active diplomacy has raised hopes for the resumption of multilateral talks on ending North Korea's nuclear programs, Pyongyang clearly states it will not return to the talks unless Washington stops its hostile policies against the North. First reports have emerged Washington's contested spying activities were also carried out in the Asia-Pacific region, prompting angry protests from countries including China, Indonesia and Thailand. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Friday, November 1st, and I'm Choi Yu-sun here in Seoul. We begin this morning at the nation's presidential office, where President Park Geun-hye has spoken out about the election scandal that has been overshadowing business in Parliament. The president's remarks come just days after her prime minister promised the nation that the allegations against the spy agency will soon be cleared up once and for all. Our Jin-ju reports.
President Park has broken her silence. The president hadn't spoken up about the intelligence agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election, which has taken center stage at the National Assembly for weeks until now. During a meeting with her senior aides on Thursday, President Park vowed to clarify the allegations based on law and principle.
개인적으로 의혹을 살리를 하지 않았음에도 불구하고 선거에 국가기관이 개입했다는 의혹이 제기되고 있는데 그 의혹들에 대해서는 반드시 국민들께 정확히 밝히고 책임을 물을 것이 있다면 물을 것입니다.
President Park then urged the nation's political parties to give time to the judicial branch to get to the bottom of the scandal.
그 사법부의 판단을 정치권이 미리 재단하고 정치적인 의도로 끌고 가는 것은 바람직하지 않다고 생각합니다.
It was a message to both the ruling and opposition parties to focus on improving the livelihoods of the public rather than dragging on with a dispute that will eventually be settled by the courts. The Korean leader also promised to make sure that nothing like this will happen again in the future.
정부는 모든 선거에서 국가기관은 물론이고 공무원 단체나 개별 공무원이 혹시라도 정치적 중립을 위반하는 일이 없도록 엄정히 지켜나갈 것입니다.
So what made President Park change her mind and finally comment on the issue? Political pundits say it was out of concern that her silence could result in additional backlash from the public and opposition parties should she leave for her tour of Europe this weekend without saying anything about the allegations. Jin-ju, Arirang News.
When it comes to North Korea, it's often one step forward, one step back. Recent events seem to suggest that the nations involved in the six-party denuclearization talks were making progress toward resuming the negotiations. But Pyongyang on Thursday threw cold water on the looming optimism. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on the mixed signals.
It won't be North Korea making the first move to restart the six-party denuclearization talks. At least, that's what the country's foreign ministry says, referring to a recent remark made by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry as a serious political provocation. North Korea's foreign ministry spokesman said the comment clearly reflects Washington's hostility towards Pyongyang. He claimed that the preconditions for dialogue laid out by the United States are a cunning method of blocking the resumption of the six-party talks while avoiding responsibility. The spokesman went on to say that the North will never make the first move for opening talks unless Washington ends its hostile policies. Secretary Kerry said that it is hard to excuse what he called a rogue state that spends all its money for developing missiles rather than on improving the lives of its people. North Korea's comments come at a time when international efforts for resuming the multilateral dialogue seem to be gathering speed. Following a string of meetings with U.S. officials this week, Chinese nuclear envoy Wu Dawei showed confidence in bringing back all members of the six-party talks, the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, to the negotiating table. Wu is expected to meet with North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Kim Young-jun in Beijing and explain the details of his U.S. trip. Meanwhile, South Korean nuclear envoy Cho Tae-yong is also planning a trip to Washington as early as this weekend to meet with his U.S. counterpart Glenn Davies, which will be followed by a visit to Beijing. But officials in Seoul say the countries are still exploring various conditions for resuming talks, and that the day the six nations sit down together again is not in any way imminent. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Some disappointing news from listed firms here in the country. Nearly half of them say their operating profit fell on year in the third quarter, largely brought down by the poor performance of builders and chemical firms. The country's IT companies, on the other hand, enjoyed a surge in exports. Our Yoo-Rian reports on who's doing well and who's not.
Korea's listed companies are turning in their third quarter report cards, and things aren't looking so good. Of the 51 companies whose results have been analyzed by more than 3 brokerage firms, about 45% posted lower operating profits in the July to September period. The companies that saw their operating profits rise were mostly from the IT sector. 5 of the 7 IT companies on the list, including Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which have been enjoying an upswing in exports of memory chips, all saw their operating profits rise by a big margin. But most other companies, especially those in the construction and oil refining sectors, saw their operating profits drop. Companies like Samsung Engineering fell into the red, and the oil refiner S-Oil saw its operating profit drop by over 95%. Auto giants Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors also turned in worse than expected third quarter performance reports, prompting experts to warn that forecasts for fourth quarter operating profits are being revised downwards. But it's a similar story elsewhere around the world. IBK Securities and the corporate researcher IBES said Thursday, profits of companies are expected to fall in most major economies around the world. Corporate profit forecasts for the next 12 months for countries like Spain, Britain, and Korea were all expected to fall for the next 12 months, and by an even greater margin in developing countries like Portugal and Indonesia. Only 6 of the 45 countries had a positive corporate profit outlook, including Russia, Taiwan, and Japan. While stock prices have been on the rise, helped by easy monetary policies of the United States and other major economies, experts say the pace could slow, given the poor profitability outlook. Yoo-Rian, Arirang News.
A new pension plan has been the subject of heated debate after the government said last month that it would have to scale back from President Park's campaign pledge due to budget constraints. Our Kim Young-gil reports on the controversy over the new policy.
President Park Geun-hye originally promised to give a monthly basic pension of nearly $190 to all senior citizens over the age of 65. But last month, the government downsized the basic pension in accordance with an individual subscription period to the national pension system. Experts say the revised plan doesn't make sense.
I agree on the fact that the government has decided to pay the basic pension program to the poorest 70% of senior citizens aged over 65. But it does not make sense to say that the government will pay the basic pension in accordance with the duration of their subscription to the national pension.
They say people will be unwilling to pay into the national pension since the more you pay into it, the less you'll receive on your basic pension. Comparing Korea's public pension spending ratio to the nation's total GDP, the national pension accounts for 1.1% and the basic pension for elderly citizens a mere 0.4%, making a combined total of 1.5%. The average public pension spending ratio for OECD nations is 7.8%. To solve the budget restrictions, the government says it will also take the country's annual inflation rate into consideration when giving out the basic pensions.
The government has decided to pay the basic pension according to the country's annual inflation rate because taxpayer money is used for the basic pension, unlike the national pension, which is a form of individual insurance.
However, experts worry that providing the new pension program will place a great burden on future generations.
Providing the elderly with more pension programs is a good social phenomenon, but considering the fact that taxpayers' money will come from future generations, I hope the new pension programs will not be an excessive burden to younger working generations like us.
The basic pension plan is awaiting parliamentary approval. If the budget is passed, the new pension scheme will begin next July. 심영길, Arirang News.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiation.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a...
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday that Asian countries are demanding an explanation from the United States following reports Washington is engaging in electronic intelligence gathering at its embassy and consulates. Australian newspaper Sydney Morning Herald reported Thursday that Australian embassies in Asia, including the one in Beijing, were being used as part of a U.S.-led spying operation. It reported U.S. National Security Agency documents show the Australian government has been allowing the NSA to operate in its embassies in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, China, and East Timor. The Indonesian government summoned the top U.S. diplomat in Jakarta to clarify the allegations. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also said the U.S. should abide by international law and that its diplomats in China should not engage in activities which could harm Chinese security and interest. The international watchdog tasked with dismantling Syria's chemical weapons stockpile has confirmed the country's declared equipment for producing, mixing, and filling chemical weapons have all been destroyed. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons said Thursday that its teams had inspected 21 out of 23 chemical weapons sites in Syria. Equipment at the two other locations were transported elsewhere due to safety reasons and then destroyed. Under a deal brokered by Russia and the U.S., Syria agreed to destroy its stockpile after Washington threatened military action in response to the killing of hundreds of people in a chemical attack on the outskirts of Damascus in August. Now that the equipment has been put beyond use, Syria has until the middle of next year to destroy the chemical weapons themselves. The jobless rate in the 17-nation Eurozone hit a record high in September as the bloc's burgeoning recovery failed to generate many new jobs. The European Union's statistics agency Eurostat says unemployment rose by 60,000 to 19.5 million, meaning 12% of working-age people were jobless in September. The unemployment rate for the 28-nation European Union stayed steady at 11%. The jobless rate for under 25s edged up 0.1% from August to 24.1%. Youth unemployment was lowest in Germany and Austria. Greece and Spain were on the opposite end of the scale with youth jobless rates of over 55% last month. Former managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, has warned of a possible international crisis over foreign exchange rates. During a keynote speech at a conference in Seoul Thursday, Strauss-Kahn said the U.S. Federal Reserve's expected cutback on quantitative easing could cause emerging economies to face foreign exchange rate pressure. He added scale-back monetary policy in the U.S. could attract lump sums of capital back into the U.S. market from emerging countries, which would weaken their foreign exchange rates against the greenback. The former IMF chief stressed emerging economies are not equipped to handle such a situation and raised the possibility of another global crisis like the one seen in 2008. An Earth-like planet not only in size but also in nearly the same proportions of rock and iron as Earth has been found for the first time outside our solar system. NASA's Kepler spacecraft spotted the planet dubbed Kepler 78b some 400 light years away, and just like Earth, it orbits a star that's slightly smaller than our sun. But don't get your hopes up for finding alien life on the planet. Kepler 78b is located much closer to its orbiting star and completes one orbit in just 8.5 hours. Its surface temperature is also not far from being habitable, measuring in at somewhere between 2,000 to 2,800 degrees Celsius. And back here in the country, more South Koreans, especially women, are living to a ripe old age. The life expectancy of Korean women ranks 3rd in the world, while Korean men are at 15th on a global scale. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
A United Nations report released Wednesday shows that the life expectancy of Korean females born between 2010 and 2015 is expected to reach 85, the world's 3rd longest. Japanese women can expect to live longer lives than any other nationality in the world at 87. The life expectancy of Korean males at birth stands at 78, the world's 15th longest, following countries such as Japan, Hong Kong, and Sweden. For both Korean men and women, life expectancy lengthened by a year from 2012. It's not all good news, though, as the country's birth rate remains among the world's lowest. The report projects the global average birth rate between 2010 and 2015 to reach 2.5 children per woman. Korea's birth rate is expected to record half that, with 1.3 children per woman. This is down 0.1 live births per woman from a year ago, making it the 3rd lowest birth rate in the world. In addition, the proportion of the population between the ages of 10 and 19 took up a mere 13% of Korea's total population in 2010, almost 4 percentage points lower than the global average. The UN report also highlighted the high rate of teenage pregnancy in developing countries, 7.3 million every year, and called on governments to help girls attain their full potential through education and adequate health services. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with Game 6 of the 2013 Korean series between the Doosan Bears and the Samsung Lions. With the Doosan Bears up 3-2 in the best-of-7 series, let's take a look at the highlights from last night. Of course, going into the game here, starting pitchers on the night, Dustin Nippert for the Doosan Bears and Rick Vandenherk taking the mound for the Samsung Lions. But in the top of the first inning, Chung Soo-bin sends this one to deep right field, a leadoff home run to start things off, and the Doosan Bears off to a great start. But in the 3rd inning of the game, men on 3rd, Bae Young-sub flies out to center field, a sac fly ties the ball game 1-1. 5th inning, here is Choi Jun-suk, and he drills this one to deep left center field. There it goes, gone, tearing it up this series as Doosan now takes a 2-1 lead. But shifting over to the 6th inning, Chete in, and he goes the opposite way, and there it goes, back, gone, a 2-run shot, and Samsung takes the lead 3-2. Next inning, 2 men on, Park Geun-hye, and no doubt about it, a 3-run shot, and that's gonna do it. The Samsung Lions forced the series to Game 7 with a 6-2 victory. And now shifting over to the majors, where Game 6 of the 2013 World Series between the St. Louis Cardinals and the Boston Red Sox took place on Wednesday night at Fenway Park. And despite Michael Wacha taking the mound for the Cards, the Red Sox lineup tear it up as they easily take Game 6 6-1 as Koji Uehara strikes out Matt Carpenter for the final out. For David Ortiz, who hit .688 in the World Series, including 2 home runs, he earns the MVP honors as fans celebrate their first World Series victory at home in Fenway Park in 95 years. And moving over to football, where Incheon United star Lee Chun-soo made a formal apology in front of the press regarding his "I didn't do it" incident. The 32-year-old former national team member was accused of assaulting a customer at a bar in the early morning of October 14th, faced a crowd of press members on Thursday, and read his written apology. The footballer stated that he wanted to apologize to the citizens of Incheon, the fans, and the team for letting them down. He also added that he will be a changed man and asked for their forgiveness. Now, the incident made headlines when Lee denied the allegations in an interview before he was caught with the false statements. And finishing things off with some Thursday night's KBL action as we first take a look at the Goyang Orions taking on the Seoul Samsung Thunders. Of course, going into the game here, a back-and-forth game in the first quarter as both teams finish off the quarter with 22 points apiece. But in the second quarter, Samsung starts running away with the game as they outscored the Orions 19-15 to take a 41-39 lead after the first half. But the second half of the game, Leon Williams lighting it up with 12 points in the third quarter as the Orions start controlling the paint in the second half. Leon Williams would finish off the game with 29 points and 8 rebounds as the Orions rally back to take this game 75-63. And next up, the Seoul SK Knights taking on the Busan KT Sonic Boom. First quarter, SK takes a 19-15 lead before both teams struggle from the field in the second quarter as SK takes a slim 29-27 lead going into the second half of the game. Third quarter, Courtney Sims leading the way for SK as the Knights outscore KT 20-13 in the quarter before Kim Sun-hyung helps the SK Knights cruise through in the second half. The SK Knights continue their great start to the season as they take this game 60-51, your final score. And that is going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. So a stretch of beautiful weather will continue with cool nights and mornings and pleasant afternoon. And as for today, morning lows and afternoon temperatures are expected to be higher than yesterday. So the November 1st is kicking off with nice sunshine and mild temperatures that's hovering in the low 20s in most regions. Well, right now we are looking at a few clouds hovering over the peninsula, but these clouds will gradually give way to sunshine as we go through the day. And in the meantime, the East Coast will stay mostly cloudy throughout the day. Tomorrow, most of the nation will wake up to cloudy skies and it will remain partly to mostly cloudy all day long. Also, chilly afternoon is in store for the central region, so do bundle up tight if you have planned to be outdoors. And we're looking at a chance of a few drizzles in the morning hours in Seoul and surrounding area. And on Sunday afternoon, there's another chance of sporadic showers in Seoul metro area. And temperature will be staying in the middle teens in the northern parts of the peninsula, while the southern regions will have a slightly higher afternoon highs hovering in the upper teens. Well, in November, Korea starts stepping into winter. Morning lows may drop down below freezing at the end of November, but a chance of snow is slim. With that in mind, it's time to take a look at the readings for today. A morning low in Seoul started off at 8 and will top out at 20, while Daegu, Gwangju, and Busan will all make it to 22 with a fair amount of sunshine, or 21 that is. Let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Daejeon should see a high of 20 under nice autumn sun, while Gyeonggang stay in the single digit throughout the day. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all from me at this hour. Enjoy your morning commute and hope you have a wonderful Friday. Now back to Yusun in the studio.
Thank you, Jian. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Thank you for being with us.